Yeah, I think that's the hardest part. I was talking with a really, really good friend yesterday. We were talking about people that can quote verse after verse. And I said, okay, I'm glad they know all the lines in Isaiah. I'm glad they know all the lines in Revelations, but do they know Jesus? So I'd rather know one verse in the Bible and know Jesus really, really well versus not know Jesus and know every verse in the Bible.
Welcome everyone to the Kingdom REI podcast. This is your host, Ellis Hammond, founder of the Kingdom REI Mastermind, and this is the podcast show to help kingdom leaders and investors just like yourself find permission to crush it in business and at the same time walk with God in business. And we got the perfect guest, I think, to really bring both of these ideas together today. Dr. Bruce Hartman is a Christian author and storyteller who is a Fortune 500 CFO, 35 years in the corporate world, including many years with Foot Locker, Yankee Candle Company. I haven't heard of Yankee Candle Company in a long time, Bruce. I'm excited to hear more about that. But really now is on a mission to really help people in the business world walk closer with Jesus and see that both those things don't have to be separate. And I can't think of a more fitting message for the Kingdom REI podcast and a better guest. So welcome, Bruce, Dr. Hartman. I'm not sure which one you can let me know which one to call you. So excited to have you here, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Alice.
So before we jump in, and I want to hear about let's do this. I always want to know kind of who we're speaking with before we get into your experience. I know some of the things that we're going to talk about today is, is Jesus good for business? I mean, that really is the question, right? Is it really true, or do we just say that? And I think with your experience, you're going to be able to answer that. And so, we back us up a little bit and tell us about yourself, and then kind of we can dive into this topic.
Yeah, for 35 years, Alice, from college, I always wanted to be a Fortune 500 CFO. So I built my career out of doing that. And I rose up from an entry-level accountant, eventually became a controller, and then a divisional CFO. And then my last 15 years, I was a CFO for Foot Locker and Yankee Candle. Yankee Candle is it's a larger company on the East Coast and Midwest than it is in we always struggle. I remember always the conversation, why can't we do more business in California? For whatever reason, Californians just don't like Yankee Candle.
Yeah, say because you got to change your name. That's easy. I could have told you that, man. You guys didn't have to talk about that too long.
Yeah. So, and Ellis, and I did very well. I mean, when I got to Foot Locker, we were there were days where I wasn't sure the company was going to have to file bankruptcy because previous management had made a lot of bad decisions. We had $1.4 billion of debt. We weren't making any money. We had negative sales. And we got a wonderful team together. And in 2 years, we turned it around. We went from being Wall Street Journal, we used to call us the financially troubled Foot Locker company. That was the headline whenever you read about it in the Wall Street Journal. And then finally in Forbes wrote an article about the wonderful turnaround. And that's when I kind of felt like we had done a good job. And so I was there for a number of years, and I was offered a job of more responsibility with Yankee Candle to be their number 2 person. And I went up there. And I worked there, wonderful company, great people. It's about a way business should be run. But while I was there, and I'd been getting these urges, Ellis, for about 10 years prior to this. My minister would say, will you be on this committee? Will you be on that? Will you do this? And, when you're in business, it's hard to find the time to sit on committees. And Ellis, I find myself doing the sign of the cross. Like when good things happen, it kind of like startled me. So what's going on here? And so and now as I look back at it, that was Jesus calling me to come help him in a different way. So on a Monday morning, May 5th, in 2009, I had a moment where I felt like I had forgotten how to pray. I'd forgotten who Jesus was. And it was the most difficult moment of my life. And it was from that moment that I decided, I set the course for the rest of my life, which was I tried to work and, be a Christian, but that wasn't where Jesus wanted me. For a lot of people, it's good. For me, I didn't feel that. So I went to seminary. 3 years, got a master's of divinity, and then 4 years, I got my doctorate degree. And the reason why I did that was I felt compelled to know more about Jesus, know more about what are people hearing, what are the schools telling us, those of us that are theologians, what are they telling us to tell people? So what that allowed me to do was really get focused near the end of my studies on you have Jesus and you have business, and naturally they should be combined because Jesus is everything in our lives, and we all have to work because we all got bills to pay. So that's really been my ministry. I help people counsel. I help people with counseling to get jobs. I speak on college campuses. I write books. I have my own website. I do my own podcast. So it's all about helping some individual get closer to Jesus.
Yeah, well, like I told you before, we're gonna make sure that happens today for sure. I'm curious to go back to that story a little bit for those who are listening. Mostly entrepreneurs, business owners, etc. I mean, looking back, you said you had that moment where you kind of forgot to pray. Yeah, I feel like a lot of that was not just all of a sudden, but like it was the kind of slow drip right before you were just kind of empty. And
Yeah, that
what caused, I mean, what, as you look back, things that people like, I don't know, like how do you look back at that and be like, this is kind of where I went wrong?
So where I went wrong was, I talk about this a lot with folks, is I had a 100 plus item to do list every single day. And my day was like being a dentist. There was always somebody at my door pressing for something, needing an answer and stuff like that. The better you get at handling 100 items, the more you move away from the spiritual side of life. Right now, um, and for me, I got very, very good at handling all of these items. There would be no subject I didn't know anything about. So that obsessiveness is what moved me away. And it's that obsessiveness that Jesus asked me to get rid of.
That's really interesting. Like, what do you mean by obsessiveness? Because the only reason I think that sticks out to me because I feel like I'm obsessed. Like I love what I do. I'm obsessed over our goals, our mission. So in some ways I'm like, oh crap, So can you double click a little bit and expound on what do you mean by that?
So you get pulled. You get pulled. Okay, when's this store opening? How's that sale doing? How's the inventory level? What's going on with this buyer's business? And when you become obsessed, you want to know everything. And it wasn't like I was a bad manager because I managed at a macro level, but the issues I would get into were very carefully managed in my mind. Not that I carefully managed people. And what I'm saying is you have to be well-rounded, and I wasn't as well-rounded as I should have been,
Right.
in terms of managing the business. I still have this same obsessiveness today. So I have a book that's coming out. Okay, have we got the marketing done? Have we got all that stuff? I still do it, but I'm doing it for him.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it for me.
I can't wait to talk about the difference between that because I feel like that's so hard, because how do you remove yourself from this minute, like still do that, still be. I mean, most entrepreneurs are obsessed. Like that's why we're entrepreneurs, like we just, we run through the wall to make it happen. And so I can't wait to get in there. I just want to stop and pray for us if that's okay, and then we can really dive into the meat of what we're going to talk about today. So God, we thank you so much for this time together, and we just know that this is from you. We pray that this episode will be for you. God, that you would help us to be true living sacrifices for your kingdom, to use our businesses, our lives, our marriages, our money, to make much of the name of Christ, because we owe everything to him who lived the perfect life, who died the death we should have died and resurrected with power that we have access to today. So thank you for Bruce, Dr. Hartman, and just pray that his message and his experience and his story would really draw us closer to you. I know that's his prayer as well, and so we ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So your book, and Jesus is Everything is the name of your new book.
Right.
I mean, what a title. I mean, how long did it take you to come up with that one?
Well, so one of the things I do is I use Twitter for bouncing ideas off. It's like my market research, right? So one morning, I usually get up around 4 or 5 every morning. I put on Twitter, who is Jesus to you? Just that simple question, who's Jesus to you? My Twitter feed blew up. I got everything. But Ellis, the one I got the most was Jesus is everything. So I started thinking about, what does that mean to that person? Jesus is everything. What does that say? What do I need to know here? So when that person's happy, they're thanking Jesus. When that person's sad, they're going to Jesus. When that person needs advice, they're going to Jesus. That's what Jesus is everything means. And at the same time, the confluence of this, and I heard a very touching story about a man that was 87 and died, and his sons spent the last 3 or 4 days. And it's the opening scene in the book, by the way. They spent the last 3 or 4 days working with him on accepting Jesus at that moment. And the man died. He got to talk to all 18 grandchildren, all 5 of his children, and his wife in his last hours, probably the last 24 hours. He got to say, I love you. And he heard, I love you. And he accepted Jesus, and he went peacefully. And I was thinking about that story with what those people were writing at the last minute of this man's life. Jesus was everything to him. He didn't have to shave. He didn't have to pay a bill. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to cross the bridge. And that's what those people meant when they said Jesus is everything. So I wrote the book, and it was a wonderful book to write. A lot of research. I drew in some business stories, and I drew in some ancient folks like Mother Mary. Certainly Paul and Peter are in the story, why Jesus was everything to them. Mother Teresa. So it was a fun book to write, and really glad. And it's doing well, and we haven't even launched it yet.
Well, you'll have to let us know. We can link that in the show notes below. But is there a simple webpage that you have where people can go find that information?
Yeah, www.brucelhartman.com, or you can get it on Amazon. Even though we haven't released it, it's for sale on Amazon. Jesus is everything, and we have an audio book, which I was really excited about. It's my first book with an audio. I didn't do it. We got a wonderful narrator, and it's you can get it on Kindle. You can get it today if you want on Kindle, and it's paperback as well.
Who owns the domain? I'm just looking because I'm actually super curious. Jesus is everything. This is hilarious that I'm doing this right now in the middle of our podcast show, but I'm actually really curious who owns JesusIsEverything.com, because I'm like, what would be amazing? That's amazing domain. Nah, you can't get it, unfortunately. You can get JesusIsEveryJunk.com or JesusEverything.net. It's not nearly as cool. So sorry about that. I was trying to help you out there. So you can't, but we know you can go find it. Jesus is Everything on Amazon or BruceLHartman.com. So going back to your original point, because your new book, Jesus is Everything. I really want to dive into this because this is a rub. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like I'm in a season of my life, and maybe this is of the Lord's timing to have you on here, where it feels like business has been everything. And we just had a daughter. I got a month-old. So God. She's been everything. and so, Jesus has not really been everything, Dr. Hartman. And I'm curious, just how does he stay everything when he's not everything at the moment, if that makes sense? In this stage and season of life, where I feel like not just myself, but so many people probably find themselves at.
Yeah, I talk about that in the book. A lot of people think that you have to always be doing magnificent stuff like what Billy Graham did, or Mother Teresa, or Desmond Tutu. You have to always, no, that's not what Jesus is looking for. Jesus is looking for, if you're a husband, he just wants you to be a great husband. That's your time of life. If you're a dad, he wants you to be a great dad. If you're in business, he wants you to always work as if you're working for the Lord, but doesn't mean that you're working for the Lord. You're working as if you're working for the Lord. Because not everybody is called to be a minister or a priest, but everybody's called to pay their bills. So, and that's one of the things I talk about a lot in the book. It's not about spending like a monk 100% of your time. When you're a dad, you know, you've got to do what you think Jesus would want you to do. That's all you have to think. You've done enough.
You know, it's interesting to say that. So this morning I actually, like, part of it is that my mornings have been so rough, but I really made a decision this morning. I'm going to get up at 5. I'm going to go work out. I was really proud of myself, and I had some time to finally like sit down and read my Bible and meditate. And about 8 minutes in, my daughter starts crying, you know, surprise, month-old, and my wife's still sleeping, and I'm thinking, dang, you know, like should I go hold her so my wife can sleep longer, but then I don't get my meditation time? And, I thought, no, I think actually and I just sensed that like the Lord was calling me to, hey, go pick up your daughter so that your wife can sleep. Like that's actually would be okay. You know what I mean? Because just what you said, like, I'm still with you in this moment, and your calling right now is to really serve your family. And so I just appreciate that freedom there, because I think even this morning I sensed that of like kind of the first time in a while that I actually had some quiet time. I was proud of myself for doing it, was looking forward to it. And then I didn't really get much in. So, but because that other calling kind of called in a sense, but it did sense like it was from the Lord to say it's okay, so I appreciate you saying that. I hope that story might help someone who's listening as well. But anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part. I was talking with a really, really good friend yesterday. We were talking about people that can quote verse after verse. And I said, okay, I'm glad they know all the lines in Isaiah. I'm glad they know all the lines in Revelations, but do they know Jesus? So I'd rather know one verse in the Bible and know Jesus really, really well versus not know Jesus and know every verse in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'm talking about is we all have lives to live. We all have a destiny. Jesus has a destiny for us. And the destiny is to have a great relationship with Jesus, but to have a great relationship with those of us around us through Jesus. And I think that's the difference of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, even look at the life of Christ, where he was always, yes, he spent time away with his Father, but he was always drawing people to himself, which is killer. So I want to get back to this topic though, because we were talking about this offline. I think it's so interesting. You give this talk a lot. Jesus is good for business, and and I think it still is in the line of Jesus is everything. I'm glad we've laid this foundation, because I want to understand what you mean by that, because I think we both had experiences, and maybe you can talk about one where, I think honestly it's why people listen to this show, is because there aren't many people out there saying Jesus is good for business. Most people are either saying, don't bring Jesus in this business, right? We don't want to hear about Jesus. Or on the religious side, sometimes it can feel like business is not really applicable to what we're talking about.
Yes.
In terms of our faith. And so what do you mean?
So there's two sides to this. And you talked about the minister. I talked to you about that story earlier about the minister in New Bern who said that my first book was sinful. The first book was Jesus and Company. And I remember thinking, those are one of those moments where you just be quiet. As the Lord said, take the dust off your feet and leave that town, right? He was missing that half his audience on Sunday needed help on Monday morning at 8:15 by not talking about business, because that's the reality. Most people spend their week working to pay their bills because they have to. Jesus isn't about us not paying our bills, and Jesus is not about us not working, and Jesus is not about us following our passion. What Jesus is about is how do we do it with him and through him. And that's a big difference, I think. So for instance, let's talk about customer service in a business. You don't have to go any further than the golden rule if you want to have great customer service. Treat the customer as if you would want to be treated. The golden rule. To me, and from spending years in business, I know the one thing I know is that the lifeblood of every single company is their customer. Otherwise, why do you exist? So if that's your most important thing, activity, do it really well and do it the way you'd want to be treated. Second thing about business, work as if you are working for the Lord. That comes from Colossians. Think about having employees that always thought, I'm working for Jesus. You're going to have a sustainable business. You're going to have ethical decisions, and you're going to have business transactions that hold up under the light of fire. And as you go forward years later, you'll think about those decisions, and because they were solid and they were well made, your business will be foundationally solid. But so if you're having a career, so won't your career. People will think of you as, this is an honorable person, and I want to hire them. So that's what, when I think about Jesus and I think about our faith, it's good for business. Now you look at Chick-fil-A, number one fast food company in terms of sales per square foot per week, and they're closed on Sunday. So when I think about Jesus in business, it's okay. Jesus doesn't want us poor. Jesus doesn't want us making unethical decisions. That's what Jesus's message is.
So go back to the turnaround with Foot Locker that you were describing. And I, again, who knows if your mindset was Jesus is everything during this, because you said it was a hard season. But looking back, do you see some of those principles in that turnaround?
It was the only thing that saved us was our ethics and our morality. I remember, Ellis, the first day on the job, we were $1.4 billion in debt. There was no way that you could find or demonstrate to anybody we were going to make money, because there was no history of it, and our sales were dropping. So I remember the banker saying to me, can you hit these projections? I can't guarantee it, but I can guarantee I'm going to work hard. And it was interesting, 6 months later and a year later, the bankers remembered that line more than any others, because a lot of people say things, but in that case, they knew by what I said that I would do the best I could. And that was one of the things that helped save us, because anytime I called the bank after that to get a favor or to get help or something like that, they bent over backwards for me, because I was honest with them. Who could ever say, don't worry, I guarantee this thing is going to work out, when there's no history of it? But we did have a great group of people that we'd hired, and we were going to work hard to do it. And that's all we could do.
Yeah. I like that a lot. It's interesting, like, not that that's like a new thought for me, but I mean, there's a lot of real estate investors, and there's always things that, you could get in trouble from a legal standpoint or whatever. So many things you got to double check on. But, I think from a stressful standpoint, there's things, I'm saying all this is business can oftentimes be very stressful because there's legalities and stuff, and in any business, of course. But I appreciate what you said just there, because like if your mindset, or if your integrity is to the point of, I work for Christ and I'm teaching my employees to do the same, or my partners, then your level, like your intention, your level of integrity and work ethic is so much higher than what the world sets anyways. It doesn't say that you still won't break legal things, because some of these things are just, you don't even know what corner, sometimes. But to the point of, at least you can look a judge in the eye one day and say, listen, man, I work, I don't work for the world. I work for Christ. And we did not know that. You know what I mean? Like, just that, for me, just now, that took a pressure off of me to say, yeah, we're trying to live and lead and do business with the highest integrity because we work for Christ. And we might get that wrong sometimes, but it doesn't, but our intentions were there. And I don't know, that just really, I think, served me very well as you said that. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure, especially in a context like Foot Locker and $1 billion under debt. I'm sure there's a lot of corners you could probably cut in a time like that.
So one of the things I always think about, and when I do work with businesses and when they're looking for help or advice, I always tell them, remember one thing: God always is long term, and our temptation is to be short term. So what that means is maybe you can kind of cut a corner here today, but it's not what God would want you to do. It's not what Jesus would want you to do. So God is always long term. So if you make a decision and you can say to yourself in a year, I'm going to be proud of that, then you're making the right decision, no matter how tough tomorrow is going to be. If you say in a year, this is going to be okay.
That's a great line for real estate right there. Thanks. Somebody, can I use that for my? Hey, God is long term. We got to be thinking about long term investments here. I really, that's actually really, I'm joking, kind of. I probably will use that in the future marketing line, but I totally agree with what you say there. And yeah, I mean, because when you think short term is when you cut corners and you think, not just long term in the sense of 10, 20, 30 years, but about eternity, right? And the
Yeah.
decisions we make impact us for not just in this lifetime, but in the lifetime to come as well.
Yeah, you always have that pressure. We got to make a sales budget this month. Oh, I got to hit this goal this month, or I got to hit this goal for that quarter. That's not really the issue. The issue is what's best for the business, because the quarters will always have some type of waves to them, good and bad. But it's really an upward wave, and that's what long-term thinking or godlike thinking is. It's always thinking about the future, not the present.
I'm curious, you say you talk to college students a lot about this topic. I did college ministry for a long time, and I feel like sometimes college students are just some of the most insightful because they're like the most skeptic people of all time, this generation. And so, like, when you're speaking to college students about Jesus being everything or Jesus is good for business, what are some of the things that come up that, you found to be, oh yeah, this is, I feel like how most people think.
Yeah, one of the big things about Jesus is the connection of ethics to your life. So if you're a college student, we all did. We all started out 22 years old with that. We were going to be honorable, and we were going to be the best, and we were going to be everything, right? And then all of a sudden life hits you, and that's kind of starts to chisel away at it. So with a college student, I hit them with ethics. What is ethics? Christian ethics is simply, what ought we to do? Now, there's a lot of college professors, if they're listening, they'll say, no, it's a 13-week course, and it's more than, but it really is, what ought we to do? And when you add Christianity into it, the thought is, what would Jesus have us do? And so basic ethics is, what ought we to do? So if you're walking down the street, Ellis, and you see somebody is in trouble, but you're in a hurry, ethics will tell you still help out the person in trouble. But so wouldn't Jesus, right? Or if you see that something's fallen out of your car and it's litter, you stop your car, you go, you pick it up. That's what you ought to do. And that's the basic of ethics. And to make Christian ethics is explaining to them, all you do is you add Jesus to that. What would Jesus have you do? Even though they may not be Christian, they all still love Jesus. It's just that they haven't accepted it because it's their parents' Jesus. They got to find their own Jesus. So it's amazing. A lot of the professors say, well, this is not a Christian crowd, but I will find as good a receptivity with a non-Christian crowd as I will with like Houston Baptist Seminary or Drew College, where I went to school. I get the same level of receptivity. So I approach it with Christian ethics my underlying theme.
I love that. Let me ask you then. I want to get, like, I really want to dive here, maybe before the rest of our convo, like, because I totally get that, and there's a way of like, okay, I can live my life ethically and in line with Christ, but this is kind of where I think, and you were probably doing some of those things. It sounded like you did at Foot Locker, but you still got to a moment where you said, like, I forgot how to pray. And like, I want to know, like, where does the power, like, where does the power come from? Right. Bruce, like, what is missing? Like, how do we slip into this idea of we're just living ethically, but man, I'm 10 years into my company and I forgot how to pray, like, where do we lose the power and how do we gain it back again? And by power, I mean like connection with
Right.
Christ, right?
Yeah. So for me, it was simply, I started believing I was the cause of all my success. One. And I started slowly chiseling away at what ought I to do for Jesus, for what ought I to do for Bruce. So it became selfish. And I also became so focused on being the best that I could be, I had forgot who I work for. Work for Jesus, I work for my family. And it's so for about a 2 or 3 year period there, I was pretty miserable to live with. And that's when the crisis hit. But it was because my obsessiveness had forced itself into me thinking I was the best, because everybody'd run around. This is the guy that saved Foot Locker. Look at him, came from nothing. And, now he's a successful Fortune 500 executive. So you start to believe that. But who made me successful was Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's how to get back there.
Gosh, man, it sounds so simple, but it sounds so simple, but it's not.
It isn't, because when you go to try it, it takes practice. It's like playing golf. You know exactly what you're supposed to do, but then the ball goes due left as soon as
Yeah.
you hit it.
Yeah. That's because your pride, man, is so hard. It's so hard to tell yourself you're not as good as you think you are. You know what I mean? Like it really is. So, and by the way, I hate golf. So that also is why I hate golf. It's I love playing golf, but I hate when I play it because I think I love the idea of playing golf because like in my mind I'm a great golfer, but then like you said, when you get out there, you go the
Yeah,
other way.
it's about practice. And the other thing too, Ellis, I'm free of pressure now because I'm not working for me. I'm working for Jesus. There's no pressure there. And so I don't have to worry about, am I good enough? Because Jesus has already told me that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think a lot of what you said today has been so helpful in the terms of like thinking long term. Think in exactly one of our first podcast shows we talked about how the rest of the world is working towards a future goal, right? Like one day when I have this, or one day when I do this, I will become this, or I will be
Right.
this. Where the believer actually works from what's happened in the past because of what Christ has done for us on the cross and through His resurrection. We actually work out of that. And I think that really is like, it sounds so good. And like when you hear it as a Christian, you're like, yes. But yet we still so much try and like work for what's in the future, right? In terms of like an identity. And so I know you're so right. And I feel like there are days when I feel like that, and there are days when I don't. And but it's such a sweet reminder that yeah, as a Christian, we are free. Like that is the edge. And I think that's what's so different, and what you're teaching us is that actually is our edge as a Christian, is when we're so free because we have such a long-term vision that short-term hurdles or whatever those things are, we continue to roll through them. And I feel like some people are like, oh, well, if you focus too, like you're saying, if you're so free, then you lose that urgency or you lose that obsession. And I actually think it's the opposite. Like I think it's our edge that says, it's the X factor for us as Christians, right? It's what we have to tap into that can actually set us apart from the rest of the world in the way in which we work. Does that make sense? Or what can you
Absolutely.
add to clean that up for me?
So the two thoughts, when I was getting my to become a minister, because I do that as well. I was asked to explain my theology. Well, that's real easy because it's love God and love your neighbor. And naturally, being a business person, you want to condense it to something: love thy God and love thy neighbor. So it's the 6 words. And this is where the confusion comes in. The board of ordained ministry said that it was too folksy. I said, really? That's too folksy? That's what Jesus said. That was Jesus's whole emphasis for us. So it started making them think about it, but it made me know that that's where my freedom is if all I've got to do is love God or Jesus and love my neighbor, and then the rest of the to-do list is easy. And it's what you said earlier, which is, I think a lot of people miss. We aren't always going to succeed. We are going to get tripped up here and there. But that's the reason for the cross. And that's the reason Jesus went to the cross, because we get a second chance.
Wow. So good. Guys, if you're listening, the reason I like interviewing people like Bruce is, it's hard sometimes to find someone who has had this much experience in business and business turnaround. I mean, think about a company like Foot Locker, to also a man who knows the word and has walked with Christ for a long time. And so I can't recommend enough grabbing all of his books. Bruce L. Hartman, HARTMAN.com. I spelled that right?
Yes,
It'd be bad if I spelled your Jesus is Everything would be a much better domain, by the way, but that's not available. So we'll use your name, BruceLHartman.com. Guys, just go check out all that he's written. Bruce, anything else for our audience, man? A group of kingdom-minded real estate investors, entrepreneurs. What would you leave us with?
I'll leave you with that. When I do my prayers tonight, I'll remember you all. And because we were together today, and keep you in my prayers. But I think it's to just be present with Jesus as often as you can, whether it's with your new baby, whether it's with, like I have a daughter that's getting married next week. That's what Jesus wants us to be.
Yeah. You know what I liked about this conversation today? First of all, it was very casual. I don't know, it felt very comfortable. But I think we try and complicate this so much. And today it just was like, I think I needed this today more than anybody listening, and quit trying so hard, Ellis, to make things work or happen. Like it really is a relationship with Christ that we bring into every area and arena of our life. And so anyways, thanks for that. And thanks for the timing of this. And I'm really grateful to have you on today.
Yeah, I'm really glad I met you as well, Ellis. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. So everyone, please make sure you go check out Dr. Bruce Hartman, BruceLHartman.com. He's got several great books. If you're enjoying this show like I am, sometimes I feel like I'm just doing the show for myself, which is fine with me. But I know you too are loving and enjoying this because I get your comments. Do us a favor, screenshot this episode, share it online, let people know that you're listening, and tell them they also should go listen to this too. Let them know Jesus is good for business and it's okay to talk about it. And so we appreciate your support. We'll see you next week. Cheers.